Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum everyone. Okay, so continuing on our topic of marketing strategy, next and the last thing in terms of marketing strategy that we'll be covering here is the Scorpio technique. Okay, if you look at the Scorpio is basically an acronym for the things that are listed here. If you look at it in this slide, and it is a technique which is combining the very core elements of marketing, and based on those core elements of marketing, you can very quickly come up with a marketing strategy. Okay, based on again, the input for it is the overall organizational strategy, and based on the overall organizational strategy, if you look at the impact of that overall organizational strategy on these particular elements that are the base elements of marketing, so you will be able to quickly come up with a very effective marketing strategy. Okay, so this is the idea of the Scorpio technique. Now, if you look at the Scorpio, in Scorpio we have, if you see on the top, we have industry or market, then we have the customer, then we have segmentation and targeting on the left, then across we have positioning and branding, then we have customer retention, then we have offerings, and in the end, if you look at the left corner, we have organizational processes and culture. Okay, so these are the acronyms. If you can see the SCORPIO, okay, the acronyms that are used to to denote this technique, which is called the Scorpio technique. Okay, so let's go into all of them one by one. In the subsequent slides, there are a lot of details that have been explained, and you can go through that. But I'll just give you an overview in this particular lecture, in this of this particular through this particular slide, and then you can go into more depth, into more detail by looking at the slides further in this PowerPoint presentation. Okay. The first one, if you look at the customer, okay, define the first thing that would come is defining the customer or potential customer. Okay, this is a very major issue that a lot of companies do, and especially when you talk about tech startups. Okay, they come up with the idea that everybody is going in the world is going to be our customer, or everybody in a country is going to be our customer. That is not how things are. You really have to define your customer base, or your potential customer base very precisely. The more precise you are, the more diligent you are in defining the customer base, okay, in exactly finding out the customers and delineating them, that who would be a customer and who would not be a customer, the more effective and profitable will be the company's operations and the marketing effort that you put in. Okay, the more precise, the more effective, the more targeted it is going to be, and it will be very efficient. Okay, so defining the customer, who is actually the customer, okay, and who is not the customer, that is an equally important question. Okay, so once you've defined the customer base, okay, you would look at that the particular strategy that you've selected as the overall organizational strategy, is that going to change your customer definition? Is it going to change who you consider as your customer? Okay, so it may change, it may not change, depending on what particular strategy the overall organizational strategy is, and what is the scenario that is there based on all the analysis that we've looked at before. Then after you've looked at that impact, then you look at the segmentation and targeting. Okay, so have you done segmentation correctly? Okay, whatever the customer base that you've defined, has that been segmented efficiently and effectively? And the effect of your overall strategy into whether the segmentation needs to remain the same as it was going before, or should it be changing? Okay, should the segmentation change, or new segments should be added? Okay, this is the thing that you have to consider, and looking at your segmentation and points of segmentation. Then continuing in the same point, we have targeting. So obviously, if the company is looking at all the segments, should it be looking at all the segments? Should it have an undifferentiated strategy, or should it have a differentiated strategy? So if you're talking about targeting, then should the same segments be targeted, or should different segments be targeted? Okay, and should there be a change in that, this is what has to be looked at, and based on that, if there are changes that are happening, then the changes have to be defined of how should the targeting change. Okay, then coming across, we have positioning and branding. So obviously, when we talk about positioning, and if it's a differentiated strategy, then different segments might have different positions, and they might have different brands that might be focused towards them, depending on the company, depending on the product that we're looking at. Okay, or if it's the same position and the same branding for all the segments, again depending on the particular scenario, so that has to be looked at. But then in this, what we have to look at is that, is there going to be an effect of the overall strategy on this point, that should the positioning change, maybe for one segment, maybe for few segments, maybe for all segments, maybe just for the targeted segments. Okay, should the positioning and branding change? Okay, or if there are changes required, what should be the changes that should be there, or should it remain the same, again depending on the overall strategy that needs to be implemented here. Okay, then from positioning and branding, uh, we go to offerings. Okay, what are the offering, what are the customer offerings that are being given, what are the customer offerings that are being given. Okay, so should the offerings change? When we talk about offering, we understand that as the product and service mix that is given to the customers, and the bundle of benefits that is given to the customer. So should that change for a particular segment, or for all the segments? Okay, or should it change just to convey a positioning change or a branding change? Okay, so what effect will that have on the offerings, and should the offerings change or remain the same? Okay, uh, then probably the most crucial or critical, or what we should have talked about before, or as the first point, is the industry or market orientation. Okay, uh, is the overall strategy, will there be an effect of the overall strategy on the overall industry or market orientation of the company? Okay, because if you have an industry orientation, that means that you are following your competitors, you are looking at what the competitors are doing, and you're following accordingly, and it's more of like the followers or the challengers. Okay, or even the niches that are just following industry standards, and following the industry technology. If the market leader adopts a technology, the follower would adopt the technology. So you are just looking at, if the market leader goes into another segment, or opens up another segment, then you follow them in that particular segment as well. So that's called an industry orientation. Okay, as opposed to that, we have a market orientation, in which you look at the customers, you look at the customer needs, you look at customer surveys, you do extensive customer research, you look at their needs, wants, desires, you want to predict their needs, wants, desires, and based on that, you come up with a strategy, or based on that, your whole organization operates. Okay, on based on that orientation. Okay, best example of that, you can talk about Apple, because they keep on coming up with newer stuff. Okay, not probably now, but before. Um, but at this point in time, if you look at the big Chinese brands, they are really looking at market orientation. Like if you look at Haier and Huawei, okay, and even the different car brands who are now coming up. Okay, like so they are now obviously changing all of this. Okay, you can look at Tesla. Tesla is also quite market oriented. It's not an industry follower. Um, so so the idea is that, will the overall strategy that you've selected, will it change your orientation of your, or focus of your company, or the focus of your marketing effort? Okay, should it be industry focused, or should it be market focused, or if whatever it was before, would it change because of the overall strategy? Okay, then we come to customer retention, which is probably something that is quite neglected. But if you look at it, customer retention has a very, very big impact on profitability. There's one slide that gives you that gives an idea of that, in which some bars, a chart is given. But customer retention is something that companies lose focus on in their quest for progress. They lose out on their current customers or old customers, okay, and they don't focus on them. So whatever your strategy, whatever you're coming up with, you have to take care of customer retention. How would you retain the current customers? Should there be some changes given in terms of offerings, okay, or new offerings should be given, or some loyalty benefit should be given? So but customer retention has to be taken care of if the company wants to be profitable and be a successful brand in the future. Okay. Then last of this is organizational process and culture. If because of the changes that are happening in all the other parts, okay, as an effect of the overall strategy, should the organizational process and culture change? Okay. Again, if you look at a very small organization, let's say if it's just a general store, um, and let's say they want to go for expansion, they have a build strategy. In expansion, what will happen? Let's say they are opening up another store. So if they open up another store, what will happen? Maybe their other things might remain the same, but their processes and culture will definitely change, because the new store opening, you'll have to create newer processes, or even replication of processes obviously is very difficult to have 100% replication based on the environment and based on the situations. You will definitely have some process changes that will be happening, that the organization put in, and because of that there will be some cultural effects on the organizational, or the organization's culture will be changing accordingly as well. So that has to be looked at, because that will the overall strategy have or whatever you the overall strategy, as well as whatever you're doing in all the other points, will that have an effect on the organizational processes and culture that is there. And if there's something, then obviously it has to be taken care of, because that would be the anchor that would allow you to do all the other changes as well. Okay. So this is to explain all of these. There are lots of there are slides that are given, subsequent slides you can look at. And if you have any questions in this regard, then um, uh, please send them to me or communicate with me, and I'll be very happy to answer those, and to enhance our understanding in this topic. Okay. Right. This is the last lecture of this course, and definitely if you have any questions that you really need to throw them at me, and I'll reply to them. And thank you very much. Thank you very much for being patient and listening to these videos. And hope to be in touch with you guys in the future.